Welcome back for another deep dive into the world of information security.
All right.
This time we're tackling cryptography,
Okay.
specifically symmetric key algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got excerpts from the CISSP study guide as our source material this time,
Okay.
our mission, to give you a solid grasp of how these algorithms work.
Right.
Think of it as your secret decoder ring for the digital age.
That's a great way to put it. And it all starts with understanding the goals of cryptography.
Okay.
What we call the 4 pillars.
The 4 pillars.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack these pillars.
Right.
The study guide mentions confidentiality first.
Yeah.
What exactly does that mean
Sure.
when we're talking about keeping data safe?
Confidentiality is all about making sure only the intended recipient can read a message.
Okay.
Think of it like a sealed letter.
Mm-hmm.
Only the person with the right key can open it and see what's inside. And this applies to data, whether it's just sitting on your computer, traveling across the internet, or even being used by an application.
So it's like having a digital lock and key for your data.
Yep.
What about integrity?
Oh, yeah.
How does that fit into the picture?
Integrity ensures that data hasn't been tampered with. It's like a tamper-proof seal on that letter. If the seal is broken, someone's messed with the contents in the digital world. Integrity checks make sure that the data you receive is exactly the same as the data that was sent. With no sneaky changes along the way.
So confidentiality protects the content.
Yes.
Integrity protects it from being altered.
Exactly.
What's the third pillar all about?
Authentication.
Authentication.
This is about verifying identity.
Okay.
Making sure you're dealing with the right person or system.
Right.
Think of it like showing your ID to prove who you are. In cryptography, this often involves complex challenge-response systems.
Where one party proves their identity by correctly encrypting a specific message.
Oh, so it's like a digital handshake?
Yeah.
Confirming you're talking to the right person?
Exactly.
What about that 4th pillar?
Yeah.
Non-repudiation.
Non-repudiation?
That one sounds pretty serious.
It is.
Yeah.
Non-repudiation means you can't deny sending a message or taking a specific action.
Right.
It's like a digital signature that provides undeniable proof of your involvement.
So it's like having a digital paper trail.
Exactly.
That holds everyone accountable for their actions.
That's a good way to put it.
I see how these 4 pillars work together to create a secure foundation for digital communication.
Yep.
But how do we actually put these principles into practice? I know the study guide talks about codes and ciphers.
Right. Codes and ciphers are the tools we use to implement those security principles.
Oh, yeah.
But they're not the same thing.
Right.
Though people often use the terms interchangeably.
I have to admit, I've been guilty of that myself. Yeah, I think we all have at some point.
So what's the difference?
Well, think of codes like secret languages.
Okay.
They replace entire words or phrases with different words or symbols.
Okay.
A great example is the 10 code used by police.
Right.
10-4 means message received.
Yeah.
Morse code, where dots and dashes represent letters, is another example.
Yeah.
These codes are usually publicly known.
Okay.
And mainly used for efficient communication.
So it's like having a shared shorthand.
Exactly.
That only people in the know can understand.
Yeah.
But ciphers are different.
Ciphers work on individual characters.
Okay.
Bits or blocks of data.
Okay.
Using various techniques to scramble the information.
Right.
They're designed to make the message unreadable without the correct key.
So it's like putting your message through a digital blender to mix it all up.
That's a good way to think about it.
The study guide mentions different types of ciphers, like transposition and substitution ciphers.
Right. Transposition ciphers rearrange the letters in a message.
Okay.
Imagine simply reversing the letters of a word.
Okay.
That's a simple transposition cipher.
So hello would become Allah.
Exactly.
Still pretty basic.
It is a simple example,
right,
but you can get much more complex.
Okay.
Imagine using keywords to scramble the letters in a message based on a prearranged pattern.
Okay.
It might seem simple, but these ciphers can get surprisingly tough to crack.
Right.
Especially as messages get longer and keywords get more intricate.
So transposition ciphers are all about shuffling letters around.
Yeah.
What about substitution ciphers?
Substitution ciphers replace letters or symbols with others based on a specific rule.
Okay.
The classic example is the Caesar cipher, where each letter is shifted a certain number of places down the alphabet.
Like the one Julius Caesar supposedly used.
Exactly.
That rings a bell from history class.
Yeah.
So if I wanted to send the message secret using a Caesar cipher with a shift of 3, it would become VFU.
Right.
But couldn't someone figure that out pretty easily?
You're right. The Caesar cipher is very vulnerable to something called frequency analysis.
Okay.
By analyzing the frequency of letters in the ciphertext, you can often deduce the substitution pattern and crack the code.
So it's like a code breaker's version of Wordle.
Yeah, you could say that.
They're using the patterns of language to figure out the hidden message.
Exactly.
What about more complex substitution ciphers?
Absolutely.
Are those harder to crack?
There's the Wegener cipher,
Okay.
which uses a keyword to create a series of shifting alphabets, making the pattern much harder to predict.
So instead of shifting every letter the same amount, like in the Caesar cipher, you're using different shifts based on a keyword.
Exactly.
That does sound harder to crack.
It is.
Okay.
And for a long time, the Wegener cipher was considered unbreakable.
Oh, wow.
However, even this type of cipher has its weaknesses.
Okay.
Cryptanalysts developed methods like period analysis, which examines repeating patterns in the ciphertext to break these codes.
So even the more sophisticated ciphers have their vulnerabilities.
They do.
Is there any cipher that's truly unbreakable?
There's one that stands out, the one-time pad.
One-time pad.
When used correctly, it's considered to be theoretically unbreakable.
Okay, one-time pad.
Yeah.
That name rings a bell. But how does it actually work?
Imagine having a unique code book for every message. Each letter in the message is encrypted using a different part of the key. And once the key is used, it's discarded, never to be used again.
That sounds incredibly secure.
It is.
But wouldn't managing those long random keys be a logistical nightmare?
That's the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great point.
How do you even share them securely in the first place?
You've hit the nail on the head. That's the main drawback of the one-time pad.
Okay.
Key management is extremely challenging.
Right.
You need a secure way to generate and distribute those keys.
Right.
And both parties need to keep their copy absolutely safe.
Right.
If the key is compromised, the entire system falls apart.
So it's a powerful tool, in theory.
It is very powerful.
But not very practical for most situations.
Right.
What about those other cipher techniques mentioned in the study guide?
Oh, yeah.
Running key ciphers, lock ciphers, and stream ciphers.
Great question. Let's dive into those.
Oh.
Running key ciphers offer a more practical alternative to one-time pads.
Okay.
Instead of using a completely random key, they use a long key derived from a source like a book.
Okay.
Both the sender and receiver agree on a specific book and a starting point.
Right.
And they use the text from that point onward as their encryption key.
So it's like hiding a secret code within an ordinary book.
Exactly.
What a cool concept.
Yeah, it's a clever idea.
But what if someone figures out which book you're using?
That's the risk.
Wouldn't that compromise the whole system?
You're absolutely right. That's one of the drawbacks.
Okay.
The book and the starting point need to be kept secret.
Right.
Plus, the text needs to be long enough to make guessing impractical.
Okay.
Now, moving on to block ciphers.
Okay.
These encrypt data in fixed-size chunks or blocks.
Okay.
Rather than one character at a time.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
The transposition ciphers we talked about earlier? Those worked on entire messages at a time.
Yeah.
Doesn't that make them block ciphers too?
You're exactly right.
Oh, okay.
They're a type of block cipher.
Okay.
Now, block ciphers are often contrasted with stream ciphers, which encrypt data one character or bit at a time, making them very efficient for real-time communication.
So stream ciphers are all about speed.
Yeah, you could say that.
While block ciphers are about working on chunks of data. It sounds like there are a lot of different ways to scramble information.
There are. And to make things even more complex, modern cryptography uses two key principles to make ciphers stronger. Confusion and diffusion.
Confusion and diffusion.
Yes.
Those sound intriguing.
They are.
Can you elaborate on what those mean?
Of course. Confusion aims to make the relationship between the key and the ciphertext as complex as possible, making it really hard for an attacker to figure out the key, even if they have a lot of ciphertext to analyze.
So it's like making the recipe for the secret sauce as intricate as possible.
Exactly.
What about diffusion?
Diffusion spreads the influence of each plaintext bit across multiple ciphertext bits. So even a tiny change in the original message creates big changes in the encrypted message. This makes it much harder for attackers to use patterns or statistical analysis to break the code.
Ah, so it's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Where a small change in one place creates big waves elsewhere.
That's a good way to visualize it.
It sounds like these principles take ciphers to a whole new level of security.
They do. And they play a big role in modern cryptography, which we'll dive into in the next part of our deep dive.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Last time we left off talking about confusion and diffusion in cryptography.
Right.
Those clever techniques that make modern ciphers so strong.
Yeah. They're pretty amazing.
But I'm ready to move from theory to practice.
Oh, okay.
How does this all play out in the real world?
Well, you see, in modern cryptography, the actual methods for scrambling and unscrambling data, the algorithms themselves are often public knowledge. It's the keys, those digital passwords that unlock the secret messages that are kept top secret.
So choosing strong keys is obviously critical.
Absolutely.
But what does that even mean?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How long is long enough for a key these days?
We'll think back to the Data Encryption Standard, or DES. It used a 56-bit key, which was considered secure in the 1970s when it was developed. But today, a 56-bit key could be cracked relatively quickly using brute force methods. Essentially, a computer trying every possible combination until it hits on the right one.
So trying to guess a 6-character password wouldn't exactly put you in the Hacker Hall of Fame?
Not anymore.
What key lengths do we use nowadays to keep data safe?
Modern crypto systems use much longer keys. The standard now is at least 128 bits. And some systems use even longer keys. 256 bits or more.
Longer keys. More combinations. Tougher to crack.
It's all about making it as difficult as possible for those attackers.
Makes sense. But it's not just about having a strong key, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You need to manage them properly, too.
Key management is a huge deal in cryptography. It's a whole field in itself.
I mean, what good is Fort Knox if you leave the door unlocked?
Exactly.
Okay, so there's a lot more to this than just generating a long random password.
Definitely.
It sounds like you need a whole system for managing these digital keys.
You do.
What are some of the options for secure key storage?
Well, there are different approaches depending on the level of security needed. The simplest is software-based storage. Where you essentially keep the keys as digital files on a computer system. It's easy to implement, but it might not be the most secure option.
Yeah, that sounds a bit like hiding your spare key under the doormat.
Yeah, you got it.
Convenient, but not exactly Fort Knox level security.
Exactly.
If you need stronger security, you might consider hardware-based storage. This involves using dedicated devices to manage the keys like smart cards, USB tokens, or even specialized hardware security modules. Essentially high-tech vaults designed for keeping those keys safe. So it's like having a physical safe for your digital keys.
That's a good way to put it.
That definitely sounds more secure.
It is.
But I imagine it's also more complex and expensive.
It can be.
Okay.
But there's another option. Cloud-based storage.
Cloud-based?
This is kind of a hybrid approach. Where you're essentially using a hardware security module hosted in a cloud provider's data center. You get the benefits of hardware-based security, but with the flexibility and scalability of cloud services.
It's like having a virtual safe deposit box for your keys.
Exactly.
Accessible from anywhere. That's a really interesting option.
It's becoming increasingly popular.
But even with the most secure storage, you still need to get those keys to the right people in the first place, right?
That's a great point.
How do you distribute them securely? Especially when we're talking about symmetric key algorithms, where everyone needs to have the same key.
That's one of the biggest challenges in cryptography, especially with symmetric key algorithms. Remember, if the key gets intercepted during transmission, the whole system is compromised. So let's look at some strategies for tackling this challenge. The most straightforward approach is offline distribution.
Offline distribution.
This basically means physically handing someone a copy of the key. Maybe on a flash drive or even a piece of paper.
This seems a bit old school in our digital world.
Yeah, it is a bit old school.
But I guess it works if you can trust the courier, right?
It does.
But
it's not very practical for large organizations or when people are spread out geographically. That's where public key encryption can come in handy.
Public key encryption.
Now, this is a really clever system that uses two keys. A public key that can be freely shared,
Right.
And a private key that is kept secret.
Okay.
You can use someone's public key to encrypt a message that only they can decrypt with their private key.
So you could use this public key encryption to securely transmit a symmetric key.
You got it.
Then everyone would have the same secret key, but you wouldn't have to worry about it being intercepted during transmission.
Precisely. That's a common technique called hybrid cryptography.
Hybrid cryptography.
It's like using an armored truck to securely deliver the key.
Okay.
And then switching to faster, more efficient methods.
Right.
Once the key is in the right hands.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So it's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
Absolutely.
What are some other methods for secure key exchange?
Well, there's also the Diffie-Hellman key exchange.
Diffie-Hellman.
This method is a bit more technical.
Okay.
But it allows two parties to establish a shared secret key over an insecure channel without actually transmitting the key itself.
Wow.
It sounds like magic, but it involves some clever math that makes it possible.
That does sound amazing.
It's a pretty remarkable feat of cryptography.
So we've covered strong keys, secure storage, and even ways to get those keys safely to the right people. Now, I'm really curious about the algorithms themselves.
Okay.
The study guide mentions a whole bunch. DES, 3DEs, IDEA, Blowfish, Skipjack, RC4, RC5, RC6, and AES.
That's a lot to unpack.
How do we even begin to make sense of all these different options?
It can seem overwhelming at first, but don't worry, we can break it down.
Okay, good.
We've already talked about how DES, the old standard, is no longer considered secure. 3DES, or triple DES, was developed as a temporary solution. Essentially running DES 3 times with different keys.
Why would they do that instead of just creating a new algorithm?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Seems like a bit of a clunky workaround.
You're right. It's not the most elegant solution.
Good.
But 3DES did buy us some time.
Okay.
And increased security until something better came along.
Okay.
And it did have some advantages, like being compatible with existing DES systems.
That makes sense.
But even 3DES is showing its age. You also mentioned IDEA, Blowfish, and Skipjack, which were all developed as alternatives to DES.
What were some of the key differences between these algorithms?
They each have their own strengths and weaknesses. Some are faster than others. Or better suited to certain types of data. For example, Blowfish is known for being both fast and freely available. Anyone can use it without paying licensing fees.
That's pretty cool.
Skipjack, on the other hand, was developed by the NSA and has some interesting features.
Like what?
Like key escrow capabilities.
Key escrow?
Yeah.
That sounds intriguing.
It is.
What exactly is that?
Key escrow means that a third party holds a copy of the key, which can be accessed under certain circumstances, like a court order.
Okay, so someone else has a copy.
Right.
It's been a pretty controversial topic.
It has.
But it can be useful in certain situations.
Right.
Like if law enforcement needs to decrypt communications related to a criminal investigation.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like having a spare key for your digital vault, but you're hoping you'll never have to use it.
That's a good way to think about it.
Of all these symmetric key algorithms, is there one that really stands out as the best choice today?
There is. Out of all of these, the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES, is widely considered the gold standard for symmetric encryption. It was selected by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, as the replacement for DES back in 2001.
Wow, so it's been around for a while.
Yeah, it has.
And it's still the gold standard?
It is very robust.
Okay.
Using key lengths of 128, 192, or 256 bits.
Wow.
And is incredibly efficient.
So it's like the Fort Knox of encryption algorithms.
Exactly.
Tried and tested and trusted by the experts.
Yeah, that's AES.
But something you mentioned earlier really caught my attention.
Okay.
This idea of a cryptographic life cycle. Do encryption algorithms really have an expiration date?
That's a great question.
I mean, it's not like they go bad sitting on a shelf.
They don't exactly expire like a carton of milk.
Right.
But they can become less effective over time.
Okay. How so?
Remember Moore's Law.
Moore's Law?
Which says that computing power doubles roughly every 2 years.
Yeah. Technology keeps getting faster and more powerful.
Exactly.
What does that have to do with the lifespan of an encryption algorithm?
Well, that ever-increasing computing power means what was considered a strong key length a few years ago might be crackable in the future with enough processing power.
Oh, wow.
So organizations need to proactively manage the cryptographic life cycle of their systems.
So it's not a set it and forget it situation.
Definitely not.
You need to keep up with the times and make sure your encryption methods are still strong enough to protect your data.
Exactly.
What are some of the things organizations need to consider when managing this cryptographic life cycle?
They need to choose appropriate key lengths.
Okay.
Stick to secure key management practices. And have a plan in place for transitioning to stronger algorithms when necessary.
Got it.
They need to stay ahead of the curve.
Right.
Because the world of cryptography is constantly evolving.
It's a never-ending race against those who are trying to break the code.
You could say that.
So it's not just about having the strongest algorithm at this very moment, but also about anticipating the future and making sure your systems are ready for whatever challenges come next.
Exactly. And that brings us back to symmetric key management.
Okay.
Let's dive a little deeper into some best practices for keeping those keys safe and sound.
Yeah, we touched on it earlier, but I think it's worth revisiting because those keys are really the heart of the whole system.
They are.
If they're compromised.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how strong your algorithm is.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, so let's dive back in.
Absolutely. We already talked about secure creation and distribution, but let's dig into some more detail about key storage.
Right.
Remember those three main approaches: software-based, hardware-based, and cloud-based.
Right.
Each has its own strengths and weaknesses to consider.
Right. Software-based is like keeping your spare key under the doormat.
Exactly.
It's convenient, but not super secure.
Right.
Hardware-based is like having a high-tech safe for your keys.
Uh-huh.
Much more secure, but also more complex and expensive.
Yeah.
And cloud-based is like a virtual safe deposit box.
Right.
A good balance of security and accessibility.
You got it. The choice depends on your specific needs and security requirements.
Right.
But beyond choosing the right storage method,
Yeah.
you also need to think about key destruction.
Key destruction.
How do you get rid of keys safely when they're no longer needed?
You mean like shredding top-secret documents?
Exactly.
You want to make sure they're completely destroyed and can't be recovered.
Right.
Why is this so important?
Because even though a key might not be actively used anymore,
Right.
it could potentially be used to decrypt sensitive data
Okay.
if it falls into the wrong hands. Oh, I see.
Properly destroying keys is essential to prevent that from happening.
So even old keys can be dangerous.
They can.
Think of it as closing the loop on the key management life cycle.
A good way to put it.
So secure creation, distribution, storage, and destruction.
Those are the 4 pillars of symmetric key management.
Is there anything else organization should consider to really lock down those keys?
You're absolutely right. Those are the essentials.
Okay.
But there's one more principle that plays a vital role.
Okay, what's that?
Split knowledge.
Split knowledge.
Yes.
What is that?
Split knowledge means dividing the information needed to perform a sensitive operation.
Okay.
Like accessing a key among multiple people.
Okay. Is that for security?
This way, no single person has all the power.
Right.
Adding an extra layer of security and accountability.
Yeah. So it's like having 2 people each hold half of a secret code.
Yeah.
You need both halves to unlock the full secret.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a powerful technique.
But how is this used in practice?
It's often used in key recovery scenarios.
Okay.
Imagine a situation where a key is lost or compromised.
Right.
You might have a system where several authorized people, say 3 out of 5, need to come together to retrieve a backup copy of the key.
Right.
This prevents a single rogue employee from going off the rails and causing havoc.
It's like having multiple locks on a vault, and you need multiple keys to open it.
Exactly.
It seems like key management is just as crucial, if not more so, than choosing the right algorithm in the first place.
You hit the nail on the head.
It's like having the strongest lock in the world, but leaving the key under the welcome mat.
Right. It defeats the purpose.
It completely defeats the purpose.
Absolutely.
So secure key management really is the foundation for a truly secure cryptographic system.
It is.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But there's one area we haven't touched on yet.
Okay.
Asymmetric key algorithms.
Asymmetric key algorithms.
These are the ones that use public and private keys.
Exactly.
I'm really curious to see how they work and how they compare to symmetric key algorithms.
Asymmetric key algorithms are a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
But they play a critical role in modern cryptography too.
Right.
And they offer some elegant solutions to the challenges we've discussed with symmetric key systems.
Well, I'm definitely eager to dive into that world and unravel the mysteries of public and private keys.
All right, sounds good.
But I think that's a good stopping point for now.
Okay.
We've explored the complexities of symmetric key algorithms.
We have.
And we're ready to venture into the realm of asymmetric cryptography.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
It's good to be back.
We've been unraveling the mysteries of cryptography, and now it's time to tackle a whole new dimension.
All right.
Asymmetric key algorithms.
Yeah.
These are the ones with public and private keys.
Yep.
Right? I'm really curious to see how they work and how they compare to the symmetric key algorithms we discussed earlier.
Yeah. Asymmetric cryptography is a completely different approach.
Okay.
But it's equally important in today's digital world.
Okay.
If symmetric cryptography is like having one key that fits all locks,
right,
then asymmetric cryptography is like having two separate keys that are mathematically linked.
Right.
A public key that you can share freely,
right,
and a private key that you guard with your digital life.
Okay. I'm already intrigued.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That sounds way more complex than just having one shared key.
It is a bit more complex.
So how do these public and private keys actually work together?
Think of it like this.
Okay.
If you encrypt a message with someone's public key, only their private key can decrypt it,
okay,
and vice versa.
Okay.
If you encrypt something with your private key,
yeah,
anyone with your public key can decrypt it.
So it's like a one-way street depending on which key you use.
Exactly.
But why would you want someone to be able to decrypt something with your public key?
Yeah, good question.
That doesn't sound very secure.
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
This property of asymmetric cryptography is what allows us to achieve non-repudiation.
Non-repudiation.
The digital equivalent of a legally binding signature.
Right.
Remember that fourth pillar of cryptography we discussed earlier?
Right.
Asymmetric keys provide a way to prove that a message or action originated from a specific source.
Now I see.
Yeah.
So it's not just about keeping things secret.
Right.
It's also about proving authenticity.
Exactly.
How does that work in practice?
Imagine you want to send a message and prove that it was really you who sent it.
Right.
You would first create a digital fingerprint of the message
called
a message digest using a special algorithm called a hash function.
Okay.
Then you would encrypt that message digest using your private key.
Okay.
Anyone who receives the message can decrypt the message digest using your public key.
Right.
Since only your private key could have been used to encrypt it. This verifies that the message truly came from you.
So it's like sealing the message with your own unique, unforgeable digital stamp.
That's a good way to put it.
No one can fake it.
Right.
And you can't deny you sent it.
Exactly.
It's pretty ingenious.
It is a clever system.
And this is the foundation of digital signatures.
It is.
Which are used everywhere these days.
They are essential for so many things.
They're crucial for verifying software updates.
Yeah.
Securing financial transactions, and ensuring trust in countless online interactions.
Absolutely.
This is all starting to make sense now.
Good.
It sounds like asymmetric cryptography is really a game changer.
It is.
For security and trust in the digital world.
It's been revolutionary.
The study guide also mentioned that it solves some of the key distribution problems we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
With symmetric key encryption.
It does.
Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. Remember those challenges we talked about? Having to securely distribute a shared secret key to everyone who needs it, which becomes a real headache as the number of people grows.
Yeah.
And not having a built-in way to guarantee non-repudiation.
Right. Those were some serious drawbacks to using symmetric keys.
They were.
So how does asymmetric cryptography solve these problems?
Well, first, key distribution becomes much simpler.
Okay.
With asymmetric cryptography, you don't need to keep your public key secret.
Right.
In fact, you want to share it as widely as possible.
Right.
This means you can easily send your public key to anyone you want to communicate with.
Okay.
No more risky backroom deals
Right.
or relying on slow and unreliable offline methods to exchange keys.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
It's much more practical.
It's much more scalable for large groups, too.
Exactly.
Because each person just needs their own key pair.
Right.
They don't need a unique shared key for every other person they want to communicate with securely.
Precisely.
And we've already talked about how asymmetric cryptography brings non-repudiation to the table.
We have.
Which is essential for accountability and trust in any secure system.
Absolutely.
Right.
So it really addresses some key limitations.
So asymmetric cryptography solves the key distribution problem.
Yep.
makes systems more scalable and provides that crucial element of non-repudiation.
Exactly.
It sounds like it's got everything covered.
It does address some of the limitations of symmetric cryptography.
Right.
But there's always a trade-off.
Okay, what's the trade-off?
While asymmetric cryptography offers these advantages, it's significantly slower than symmetric encryption.
Oh, so it's less efficient.
It is in terms of speed.
So it's like choosing between a speedy sports car and a sturdy but slower armored truck.
That's a great analogy.
Each has its advantages and disadvantages depending on the situation.
You got it.
And that's why we often see hybrid systems that combine the best of both worlds.
Exactly.
They use asymmetric cryptography to securely establish a connection and exchange a symmetric key, then switch to faster symmetric encryption for the bulk of the data transfer.
That's a very common approach.
So it's like using the armored truck to safely transport the key and then switching to the sports car for a quick and efficient getaway.
Exactly.
It seems like a lot of modern cryptography is about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of different techniques.
It is.
And using them strategically.
Absolutely.
This has been an incredible journey through the world of cryptography.
I agree.
We started with those 4 fundamental pillars of security. Explored the differences between codes and ciphers. Even touched on the almost mythical one-time pad. And now we've delved into the elegant interplay of symmetric and asymmetric key algorithms.
It's been quite a deep dive.
I feel like I've gained a whole new level of understanding about the invisible forces that protect our digital lives.
I'm glad to hear that.
One thing that really struck me was this idea of a cryptographic life cycle. It's a great reminder that what's considered secure today might not be enough tomorrow.
We can't get complacent.
We need to stay vigilant and adapt as technology advances. Well, on that note, I want to thank you, our amazing expert.
Oh, thank you.
For taking us on this enlightening and empowering journey through the fascinating world of cryptography.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this adventure.
Yes. Thank you for listening.
Keep those digital secrets safe. Stay curious. And remember, in the world of cryptography, knowledge is truly power.
Couldn't have said it better myself.